What if I told you that there was a way you could increase your work capacity, improve your ability to handle stress, and even get better at recovering between workouts in only 2 to 3 weeks? It might sound too good to be true, but this is a common practice of elite athletes, and it's something that less experienced athletes might miss out on. That thing is building an aerobic base. However, not in the way you might think. In fact, if you do this incorrectly, it could significantly increase your risk of injury and leave you slower and less athletic than before, making it completely counterproductive. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly how and why I'm building my own aerobic base this year, based on some of the principles I've learned from studying some of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the world, so that you can take inspiration from it and hopefully avoid making some of the mistakes that end up holding a lot of people back. So the first reason I'm building an aerobic base is to decrease my resting heart rate. This indicates an overall increase in cardiovascular fitness, and my understanding is that if you lower your resting heart rate, you create a bigger gap between that resting heart rate and your lactate threshold heart rate, which would mean that you could do the same quality of work and it would be at a lower percentage of your maximum heart rate, therefore taxing the body less and giving you a shorter recovery time between sessions. And speaking of recovery, the second reason that I'm doing this is to increase my recovery time both between sessions and between reps inside a single session. When we're talking about within a workout, a better aerobic system allows you to transport oxygen and nutrients more easily and also get rid of waste products more efficiently. On top of that, your heart rate will fall faster after a bout of work, meaning that full recovery will occur faster in between repetitions. So even though we're only improving our aerobic system, we are simultaneously increasing the ability of the glycolytic and phosphocreatine systems to recover and replenish themselves. Between workouts, we get access to very similar benefits. Our heart rate will return to normal faster, creating lower stress levels in the body. We will also still have access to that increased blood flow and nutrient transportation, leading to faster and more effective physical recovery. So an aerobic base allows you to practice more, practice harder, and recover better. This means you'd have a larger total work capacity, so you can create stronger and more frequent stimulation to your body, and therefore gain more adaptation to get ahead of your competition. That all leads to the question of what is the best way to build an aerobic base? Many athletes think that the right way to build an aerobic base is with long, slow, steady cardio that's high impact and breaks down your body. I do think there is a place for steady state cardio, but I'm not a fan of high impact versions, and I don't think it's the primary form of exercise that should be chosen by strength, speed, or power athletes. That's for a couple reasons. Like, for example, if you do it for too long of a duration, it will start communicating to your body that you need to shift muscle fiber types in the direction of slow twitch, which is not something we want for explosive performance. Now, on the other hand, if we take shorter duration steady state cardio, that actually provides a great stimulus for recovery from workouts and probably won't impact your explosiveness if you keep the duration short enough. And if the steady state cardio is something like running that has a really high impact, it adds high levels of stress to your bones, joints, and tendons, increasing the risk of overuse injuries. Higher impact forms can also reduce your ability to recover by adding higher levels of stress to your body, instead of just being a gentle way to get blood moving and improve your recovery. Steady state cardio is also not very sport specific at all for explosive athletes, and it might be more optimal to target movements and expressions of power that are more relevant to what we're going to be doing in competition. With all that being said, I obviously can't tell you the true best way to develop an aerobic base, but I can tell you what I've been doing, and it's mostly from techniques that I learned from Cal Dietz, who's one of the top strength and conditioning coaches in the world. And now that I'm mentioning him, I would highly recommend getting his book Triphasic Training if you're an athlete or a coach and want to learn more about programming and strength training. So the first technique is contralateral circuits, and contralateral means the opposite side of the body to something. However, in this case, we just mean using the opposite arm and opposite leg simultaneously. The theory is that by using the right arm and the left leg at the same time, and then the left arm and the right leg at the same time, and alternating back and forth between these in a circuit, we create what's called a peripheral heart training effect. This is where the heart has to work extra hard to change the direction of blood flow and continually switch back and forth. Some versions of this have been studied for general health and wellness. They used a style where they switched between upper and lower body exercises, and it was shown to decrease blood pressure and improve heart rate variability, which is a very important metric for recoverability in athletes. There are a few key things to keep in mind with this method. First, you want to make sure your heart rate stays below the 165 to 170 beat per minute range, because getting above this is when you're going to be entering into the lactate threshold, and that will greatly increase the difficulty of the exercise and the stress on your body and reduce your ability to recover afterward. We want to keep our heart rate in slightly lower zones so that we're staying fully aerobic. If your heart rate does get into these ranges, you can simply take a rest, or you can slow down your movements and allow your body time to calm down. Now, on the lower end with this contralateral circuit, I like to try to stay above 150, and I really like it when my average ends up being about 160. You also want to tape your mouth shut while you do this, and I will say, once you get used to it, you can skip the tape, but I think it's really helpful for building in the habit. Having your mouth shut will drastically increase the difficulty of doing this circuit, but you can almost consider that as a good thing, because then if your heart rate gets too high, you get to take a break. The nasal breathing is great for you, one, because it increases the quality of air you intake, two, because it helps to expand your nasal cavity, making nasal breathing easier in the future, and three, because it increases nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, so it'll improve the transportation of oxygen and nutrients to and from your muscles. You can perform these circuits for anywhere between 20 and 60 minutes, and I personally just started with 20 minutes my first week, then did 25 my second week, and on my third week, I'm doing 30 minutes. There are also 4 levels of difficulty based on how long you do your exercises for compared to how long you rest. Level 1 is 15 seconds on and 10 seconds off. Level 2 is 20 on, 10 off. Level 3 is 25 on and 10 off. And level 4 is 30 seconds on and 10 seconds off. Now, as for the actual exercises to rotate between during the circuit, I have been doing a band row with a lunge, a step up with a dumbbell overhead press, a single leg Romanian deadlift with a row, and a band press with a lunge, and just repeating through those. And again, if my heart rate ends up in the high 160s or the 170s, I take a rest for 1 exercise period and make sure that my heart rate gets down to around 160 or 150 before I go again. I use an interval timer like this to keep track of my exercise and my rest. The great thing about these circuits is that they have benefits outside of just the cardiovascular ones. They also build in local muscular endurance, which will increase work capacity in the weight room, on the track, the field, or even the court. Also, the first time I did this, my legs were completely toast the next day, much more than I would have expected due to how light the weights were, which showed me that this is a lot more difficult than it seems. The next method I have been using is steady state cardio, but only short duration, 20 minutes on the low end and maybe as long as 40 minutes on the high end. On this, I've been aiming for an average heart rate of 130 beats per minute because I've heard people say that's the best range for improving your recovery. It'll also increase your overall fitness and your ability to sustain effort. It is important, in my opinion, to make sure this is a low impact cardio like biking or swimming. Like I mentioned earlier, I think jogging is just too taxing and too risky. I personally chose to bike, and I do this on Tuesdays and Thursdays while I'm doing my contralateral circuits on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If this steady state cardio is super hard and you feel absolutely dead afterward, you're probably pushing it too hard. It should be relatively easy and feel pretty good while you do it. You also want to breathe through your nose during the steady state cardio because of how it encourages proper breathing patterns, decreases your stress levels, releases the nitric oxide that I talked about earlier, and prevents overbreathing, which is a really common issue talked about in the oxygen advantage. There are also 2 other types of training that CalDietz recommends, but I personally haven't been doing them due to time constraints and fatigue, but I'll go ahead and explain them to you anyway. The first is called metabolic recovery running, where you jog 3 laps of a field at an effort that brings you to a heart rate of about 110 beats per minute. Then you start doing some specific movements like karaoke, side shuffles, and skipping for 20 to 30 meter increments as you go around the field. This will shoot up your heart rate even though your muscular output isn't particularly high, and the multi-directional component can improve performance by strengthening small stabilizer muscles and getting in the lateral work that so many athletes, especially track and field athletes, lack. This metabolic recovery running can and should be done barefoot to strengthen your feet and make sure you're contacting the ground properly. Just like all the other stuff, you want to do this with your mouth shut or taped shut, and you want to keep your heart rate under 170, but you only need to do this one for 8 to 12 minutes. And the final training technique to increase work capacity are long hold isometrics. These are intended to build up your local muscular endurance, and they are usually holds of about 5 minutes each. They're supposed to create tissue remodeling and have been utilized by some very high level explosive athletes. The key to these is using a joint angle or a weight that isn't too heavy. If the movement you're doing is too difficult, oxygen won't be able to enter and leave your muscles, and we don't want our tissues to become hypoxic during these movements. CalDietz recommendation is using about 30% of your 1 rep max if you're doing a traditional exercise. Since I'm new to these things, I personally was sore enough from the contralateral training that I didn't think it was a good idea for me to include these long hold isometrics, so I can't give my personal experience with these, but I just wanted to share them in case it was helpful for any of you. Now, if you want to incorporate all these methods into a single training week, it could look something like this. On Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, you would just do your contralateral circuit and any other speed, plyometric, or multi-directional training that you want to do. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the mornings, you would do a bike ride, and then in the evenings, you would come back and do your 5-minute isometrics followed by your metabolic running. This aerobic base building is really important for work capacity and recovery in athletes, but a lot of athletes either skip it or do a bunch of long, steady cardio, and even worse, high impact cardio like jogging to try to gain the same benefits. Another thing that some athletes mess up is neglecting a body part that not many people think about, but it might be one of the biggest differences between elite level athletes and average ones. So if you want to learn what that is and how to train it, check out this video here to make sure you're getting the most out of your training and maximizing your athleticism.